So I'm back, ready to start adding values or tone to the drawing that we just did. So just to recap, where we are is in Rome, Italy. This is in the Borghese gardens. So I'm doing a bit of a look at the gardens, but also at this temple. This is a temple built 1780s, around 1790, dedicated to the Greek god Aesculapius, the legendary Greek god of medicine. There is a statue inside, supposedly taken from originally from the Tiber. I don't know. I don't have my facts straight. There's an ancient statue inside. The actual temple's fairly old, but it's not from ancient Rome. It's from the late 1700s. Nonetheless, it's still very beautiful, built in the Greek Ionic style. So I'm going to begin adding tone to this drawing now. I'm going to use primarily my Blackwing pencils. The 602 are my favorite, but these come in all sorts of different weights. Some are softer, some are harder than others, but the 602 is a nice medium weight. I'll probably use it most. And I'll get going. I do something sometimes when I'm drawing that I don't do when I'm watercoloring, which is masking. I'm actually going to mask out a bit of the edge of the temple to keep it light, because the smudging of the pencil leads can get pretty nasty, and it's harder to hold an edge if I don't do this. So this is just masking tape, not being that careful, but relatively cautious to put it where I want it. Just a quick little workaround to maintain the light in the drawing. I work my drawings up just like I do my watercolors, from light to dark, which means I begin to add the midtones first. As I said a little while ago, the sky, I want it to be light, but I don't want it to be pure white. I want all the bright white to remain on the surface of the temple, primarily. Some in the reflections in the water, and little bits here and here and elsewhere. So what I'm doing is taking holding this pencil back as far as I can, trying to draw not with my fingers, but with a very light touch, just move the lead on its side over the surface of the paper to just lightly begin building up this tone that won't kill the light, but it'll just knock it back a bit, bringing everything into sort of a mid-range of mid-tone value. It's not something you have to do. It is sort of the way I draw I draw with my right hand, so the pencil marks fall on the surface of the paper in an angled way, almost a 45-degree angle from upper right to lower left. And rather than deny that or try to smooth them all out, I sort of try to work with it to enhance that if I can, and make the entire drawing in that flavor. So it's just a very light tone. It's not very dark, as you can see, but it's enough. I want to take away the whiteness and just leave it a lighter gray. Now what I want to decide is if I want to smooth that out with a paper towel. I think I do, so I'm not trying to deny all the angularity, but I'm just trying to unify it, smooth it ever so slightly. I think the reason is because this paper is mildly textured. I don't want a lot of fidgetiness or activity in the sky or in the distance. I want the harder edges and crisper detail here up front. So I'm not pushing down very hard at all. It's just a very light pressure just to smooth it out, still going in the same more or less 45-degree angle. Now I'm going to begin adding the background trees. I have one of these just cheap battery-operated pencil sharpeners. There's a handheld pencil pointer or sharpener that I take with me if I travel with these pencils, but when I'm here at home or in the studio, you can get electric-powered ones, or just, I like the battery-powered ones. They're lightweight, very efficient, they work. And without going too dark or too detailed, I want to start layering in the background. These umbrella pines. This is really a question of value more than detail or specificity, so I want to make sure anything I do back here stays within the mid-tone family, neither too dark nor too light, and I don't want nor need to get too carried away with details. I love the sculptural effect of these pine trees. Are almost like Dr. Seuss trees. If you can see, I'm really drawing and toning with the side of the lead, not the point, but more the side. Lays down a value, obviously easier, quicker. And there's a bigger emphasis on tonality rather than just line work. There's no reference photo at all, then none exists. I sort of made these trees up based on a couple of photos and my memories of them, so I'm just trying to, again, not being faithful to what any photo tells me, but trying to add what I think the drawing needs. Being cognizant to keep the pencil lines all going more or less in the same direction. This 45-degree angle, more or less, from right to left. Yeah, so far so good. Beyond this, we move into the larger massing of trees closer to the temple building itself. That starts to look a little less specific, a little less graphic, and also slightly darker. Again, not because it really is, but because it'll just help me turn the lights on in the drawing overall. The saved lights are all going to be, not all, but primarily on the temple building. So I definitely want a value jump between the sky, the background trees, the slightly closer trees here. But I don't want anything here to approach the darkest dark that I'm going to preserve for this encompassing larger tree shape to comb. So that's just to say I'm still working in the mid-tone values. Just a darker version along the scale. Still drawing a 45-degree angle, more or less, right to left. And I think here you can see where the little runs of tape are coming in handy because they're allowing me to draw a lot quicker, more carefree without having to hold that white edge of the temple building. I'll allow myself here and there to go off my angular grid just to add a little quicker tone, but I'm adding less pressure to these marks so that I'm really just trying to add value and not characteristic lines. I still want to maintain the dominant diagonal lines. If you want to get very dark, you can draw a little bit more with the point, obviously adding a little bit more pressure. As we get down here, near the bottoms, away from the source of light, naturally things would tend to start to look a little darker. Here's that silly Grecian urn that I work so hard to save for some reason, but we'll see if that paid off or not. So I am drawing, obviously, but I'm really adding tone. I'm thinking about shapes and values, not just lines. So it's a little bit similar to the way I paint. It's actually very similar to the way I paint. I'm thinking in shapes of value rather than descriptive elements or line-based depictions. I'm thinking about the whole drawing at once, all the value design of the entire drawing at the same time. Meaning that I know what I'm doing now all has to fall into the mid-tone range of values. Even these darks aren't going to be as dark as the darkest darks in the drawing, but they have to be on the darker end of the scale of mid-tone. One benefit, or one thing I like about this way of drawing all in one, keeping the pencil marks all going in more or less the same direction, is some of these lines start to pull away organically, naturally as dominant. And as you go along, you can play that up by emphasizing them or playing them down if you don't like them. And then you start getting these sort of streaks through the painting that are purposeful. And they, when you're all done, they organize the whole drawing for you. They pull things together. They add a sense of connection, hopefully of style. They can imply light rays coming through the trees or whatever you wish, but it is a stylistic thing, and it may not be for you. It's just something I developed over time. But I really quite like it, but it can sometimes look a little bit forced or artificial. So like any technique or gimmick, it can be nice, but a little can go a long way, and you can overdo it very easily. So far, relatively happy with this. As this goes out toward the farther side, the left side, I think what I'm going to do is become a little less, add a little less pressure to my pencil marks. So just as if you're doing a wash in watercolor, you'd fade it out as you get away from the center of interest, from the focal point. And that's precisely what I'm going to do here. I'm going to gradually fade this out as it goes off the side of the page. Less detail, desaturation of values, all of that done by, or most of that done by a reducing of the amount of pressure that I'm using, pushing down on the pencil. Connect up some of these shapes. Yeah, that's pretty good. And then you get sort of a nice gradual gradation of values away from the center of interest, off the page to the left. Knowing where you want your emphasis and where you don't just helps you assess in the moment how much time you want to spend on anything or how much heat you want to give it. It's very tempting to go overboard and detail the heck out of these trees just because I like them so much. But I know that for the sake of this drawing, compositionally, they want to fall away into the background. So I'm urging myself to back off and leave them simple. Quite easy to go back and revisit them later if you think you need to. Yes, all is fine. Leave it alone. Now what I want to do here is just terminate some of these shapes and just become a little bit more abstract as they go off the page. I'm sure I'll do a little bit more work on this side just to make it look a little bit more elegant, I hope, but in general, it's fine. When the drawing is all done, I'm often asked if I use any kind of fixative or spray, and yes is the answer, I do. Just a sort of standard fixative I bought at the art store to reduce the amount of smudging that a finished drawing can incur when it's lying around in your flat files or when people are looking at it. statue of someone up here on the very top of the pediment. I'm not sure who it is. Probably somebody quite famous, so I apologize. What I want to do here is just lay in a little bit of background tonality, so that I'll pull off the tape and add the articulation to the building, then to the water, and then the dark trees in the foreground will be the last things to be added. This can be done fairly quickly and sculpturally almost. It's just adding tonality. Doesn't need a lot more. These larger, darker trees are going to be laid over the top, so. And if you carefully pull off this tape, you should have a nice, clean, light edge. Which is good, but then you have to be careful not to drag your heavy hand over the top of that and smudge it all. So what I want to do now is go here in between these couple of columns where you can glimpse the dark trees behind. This sort of negative shape drawing, just like negative shape painting. A really good way, quick and easy, to imply a lot of detail without really showing it. One obvious question I haven't addressed yet is, what is the direction of the sun in this drawing? I'm thinking more in terms of areas of light, midtone, and dark, and not really shade and shadow expressly. But I think the reference photos indicates an overall ambient light, not a terribly strong sense of light. So must have been a bit of an overcast day. There are some shadows you can see under the cornice lines. I can adjust, add them or not add them. I could add a deeper shadow under the portico if I want. Probably I will, but I think I'd like to keep it kind of ambiguous and a softer overall ambient light rather than really harsh shades and shadows. The reasons are twofold. I think by doing that, I can kind of calm the drawing down and make it look a little less aggressive, like a nice peaceful day at Borghese Gardens. But also, if I don't have any really strong shades and shadows on the building, it'll help me maintain a lot more of the light that I've preserved so that it glows more almost from within. Moral of that story is there's no necessary right or wrong way to do it. It's what works for your drawing or your painting. You're the one doing it, so you have the power to do whatever you think looks best. Okay, I do think under the deep set portico, I don't want to kill all the light, but I think it would be a little less bright than the more forward columns. So I am going to tone it out, but I'm not going to make it black or very, very dark. The underside, I'm going to keep it sort of a luminous mid-tone. And the upper portion of the walls on the portico behind, I'm going to tone out and then fade it to pure white as it comes down closer to the ground. Trying to maintain as much of a glow and as much light in there as I can. I have to do a little cast shadow off of my ionic columns though. I love drawing and painting architecture, obviously, but I'm always looking for ways to make what I do look not too overtly or aggressively architectural, if that makes sense. Meaning, I want it to look a little more expressive and a little less technical, a little looser than a very strict Beaux-Arts style architectural drawing might. I love those kinds of drawings, but yeah, they can look very academic, very rigid, strict, and a little lifeless at times. I find them very appealing, but not everyone does. So yeah, I'm trying to thread the needle between the expressive and the technical. It looks pretty good. It's a little muddled over here. I think I can clean this up a bit. The deep set doorway on the back wall is going to be compositionally useful for me because I can make it pretty dark as it goes back inside, which will help pop out this last column. Make it more visible. On the left and the right side both. As visual information comes down closer to the ground plane, I'm softening, lightening things up, just to give it the sense that light is softly bouncing off the the floor plane of the portico, bouncing up and leaching out any details. Again, just a way to make this look a little bit more expressive and a little less technical. It's just as easy to overbake a drawing as it is a painting. I know that from grim personal experience. And often it's more powerful if you just suggest things rather than state them explicitly. So here the details are a little bit more obvious. So I'm drawing a little bit with both the side of the pencil, as I have been doing, but also a little bit more with the point as well. So sort of toggling back and forth to get detail where needed and tone where required. Your finger can be very helpful too. Along with being a problem, it can be helpful. Yeah, in the end, I don't know that I'm going to cast a shadow over this back wall. I don't think it's going to help or add a lot. I think it'll run the risk of detracting or becoming too much of a thing. Okay. Next, we'll move up top and add whatever I think is required up here. Shadows, just as I do in when I'm painting in watercolor, I know that areas of shadow, especially in a warmer climate like Italy, but it happens wherever you go. If you really study shadows, they're rarely as dark, gloomy, or gray, or miserable as you might think. There's often a lot of luminosity, bounced light. You study these shadows, there's so much brightness and color. They're really not all that dark. So I'm not doing a watercolor, but I am drawing it, and the effect is just the same. There's bounce light, luminosity. There's a lot of life in shadows. I talk endlessly about painting shadows and watercolor because really that is all we paint. We start with the untouched white of the paper, and then we don't paint the light, we just paint the shadows that give light, allow light to have its identity. That's the sort of philosophical way I look at watercolor, and for me, in drawing, it's very much the same effect. You're adding darkness with the lead, the graphite, or whatever you happen to be using. The actual light that you want so badly often to express is already there. It's the untouched paper. So all you have to do is draw enough shadows to allow it to come out and express itself organically, naturally. It wants to do it, just let it. I think I inadvertently amputated my poor angel's wings here. But no worries. There's a simple medical procedure. We'll get them back. A little lifting, or in pencil work, erasing. This is an old-timey eraser shield. You can just lay it over what you've drawn. Erase out a bit. shape it. And the poor angel has his wings back. Yeah, all these old-fashioned tools. I have had these things forever. But you know, they still work, and they're simple and effective. So why not? There's a major cornice here, so there would logically be a more dominant shadow under. Again, I don't want to be too graphic about it, but it would be there. And I think it'll make the drawing better if I include it. Here's another little workaround. You can tone an area and give it a fairly clean edge just by laying a piece of paper up to it. And then you can draw quite quickly over. So it's very similar to masking, except you're really not masking. You just, well, I guess you are, but it's just a different way to get there. And then you have a nice, neat shadow without having to work at it too hard. There's some sculptural garlanding under here in the stonework. I don't know. Just a few tick marks, that should be enough. This whole side of the temple will be in shadow. Again, it's pretty much all of it's going to fall behind the cover of these dark foreground trees, so just want to fairly quickly add some tone without any real detail. Do that same trick for the wall as it turns the corner. I'll just do a little on the spot masking. Bit of the roof that we see out, I think I'll save some of it out as light. It may not stay that light for long, but there'll be tree limbs and leaves hanging over it, so I'm not too worried about it. Good. Okay, so now, as I say, a little bit of similar tonality, some lights, some midtones, and some darker midtones for the water. And then the very darks will be maintained for these framing tree elements at the end. So yes, I'm going to do the water area now. Literally what I'm doing at this moment is just cleaning up this edge that I want crisp to pop out these lights. I don't really know what's back here. I'm just making up shapes arbitrarily, abstractly, just to help pop out that corner graphically. The little jutting of rock I'm going to leave out as pure white. The closer and closer we get into the building, the darker everything will become within reason. That pretty much holds true whatever I'm drawing or painting is, and I'm not saying it has to hold true for you or anyone else, but generally in my work, wherever the center of focus is, and that's pretty much here, that's where you're going to find most of your darkest darks, most of your lightest lights. Also, in a watercolor, it's going to be where most of the more saturated colors are. The greatest range of value, dark and light, as I just said. So the highest area of contrast will happen right there. And your crisper edges. So anything there, you want crisp edges, high contrast, saturated values and or colors. And then radiating out from that point, and this is not true for all works, but many of them it is, radiating out from that point, things become less saturated, less dark, less defined, less hard-edged. So it is a way that I organize the compositional elements of my work. And it helps ensure that all areas of the work tie together, look unified, and are connected. So nothing looks like it's left out in the cold or added on or unconsidered. I want everything in my drawings or my paintings to look like they're meant to be there. I want nothing to look extraneous or added on. So I've worked up this little guy in the boat, but I'm not sure he knows what he's doing. I think overall, as I said earlier, wants to be largely white light, but I'm working in a little bit of higher contrast just to help set up what I hope will be this triad of lights through the painting. But in order to get that to work, there has to be a little bit more value, therefore a little bit more detail over here on this corner. I do not have a hard and fast plan for graphics in the water. All I know is I want this to be reflected into the surface of the water a bit. So it doesn't need to be a mirror image, but I want a little bit of that value jump and a little bit of the representational just here along this corner. Again, I'm not trying to mimic what the reference photo shows me. I'm not even looking at it. I'm trying to set up a sort of an emotive connection between land and water, between humans and their environment, etc. It's this little story I'm trying to get this drawing to tell. But yeah, it's working. This slightly more forward outcropping of rock can be a little darker, just for variety's sake. As if it were in shadow, which it could well be. Again, I'm not looking at a reference photo, I'm just doing what I think the drawing wants or needs. And also very cognizant of trying to gather as much interest as I can in this lower portion of the drawing. Just a nod to the reflections of the columns down into the water. Again, I don't need to be too technical or explicit about it, but just a nod. They're there. Also pretty aware that as the painting reaches down toward the bottom border, I want less and less value, detail, specificity. So I want things to fade out this way as well as that way, and that way. So trying to just be a little bit more explicit right here, much less so as it grades down off the surface. So to get there, I'm thinking of shapes of value, but also shapes of water, sort of those two ideas mixed together. I'm being both a little bit graphic and a little bit representational at the same time. So some abstract ideas about the water, or some representational ideas about the water, and some more abstract ideas about composition of the value shapes. So all this is happening in my mind at once, so I apologize because I know I'm speaking very stiltedly, but I'm trying to talk in real time as best I can about exactly what I'm thinking about at that moment, but it does keep changing a little. It's not possible to give you an absolute moment-by-moment dialogue, though I'm doing my best. So I'm just inventing this as I go. I had no real plan for any of it, but I like how it's developing. I think it's going to be fine. Some of these background values look a little served, a little underbaked, so I know dark trees are going to go on top, but I just want to establish the value family behind them. Yeah, it looks okay. I think what I'd like to do here is pretty quickly trail off any of the representational conventions of this water. I don't think it needs a lot. I think in general it's fair to say that, well, speaking just for myself, I often overcook bodies of water when I'm painting or drawing. By that I mean I put too much emphasis, too many lines, too much stuff is going on. And very often they just don't need that much. Especially if you're trying to draw or paint a body of water that you want to look quiet and still and peaceful. In a way, the last thing you want are too many marks to make it look like the water is very agitated or kinetic, when really you want fewer to make the water look calmer, more peaceful. So I'm being very cognizant of trying to edit out and simplify any more marks I put on the water to keep it downplayed and minimal. But so far it's okay, it's working. I think I'll go back, do another little masking technique, add a little tone to the bottom of the water, maintaining that light edge. Just like I did in the sky up above, I don't want too much pure white going off the bottom of the page or on any part of the drawing or painting that is not the center of focus. Okay. But to that end, I think I do want this to bleed in a little so this reflection doesn't look too aggressive or too dominant. Generally, I like how it's looking. It doesn't look quite complete yet, but I'm also very sincere about not wanting to overdo this water. It's an important element of the drawing, but it is not the only one, and it's not the most important, so. It's probably better if it's a little underbaked rather than overbaked. he says as he continues to scribble away at it, but I know it needs a bit more, but I just don't want to do too much. I may leave it for now and then come back after I add the darkest trees, because it might be a little easier to assess what, if anything, is needed. Because they're a pretty important, obviously, compositional element to the whole work. And once I get them, all of the compositional elements in, I can go back and tweak others if I think they need a little assist. Yeah, looks okay. This doesn't look very elegant, so I'm going to soften some of what's happening here at the bottom. Otherwise, in the water, I think we're okay. This little creature here in the boat, I think, needs a little love. Again, far from the most important element of the drawing, but somewhat important. So I'm just going to clean up some of the areas and values around the guy in the boat. Okay, not bad. Where I am overall is good. The lights are pretty much all established. We have this nice triad of light here, here, here. Midtones I'm pretty happy with overall. I think I can see some things that need a little help, but so far everything looks good. The darker midtones, of course, I placed here, and those I think will tie in nicely graphically to the darkest darks, which I'm going to start now over here. One thing I don't love is whatever I did to the base of this little Grecian urn, which is torturing me. I think it wasn't a bad idea to add it, but it looks a little clumsy, so. It's a bit made up and fanciful, so it's up to me to make it look a little bit more elegant and refined, not quite so clumsy. Yeah, I guess that'll do. It's such a light element, though, that it probably wants a hint of a reflection, so the eraser can come in handy there. Drawing with the eraser is another thing you can do. Don't want to do too much of this yet because I'm not sure how much will be needed, so I'll leave it at that. Then I'm just going to lay in the dark shapes of the tree, and then we'll do a final assessment and see what else is needed. For that, I'm going to use a Blackwing pencil, but the softest one I have. Which I've seemed to have lost. So I think I'll go back to just the 602, which is fairly soft, pretty dark. With a moderate amount of pressure, you can get pretty dark. I'll lay down this piece of paper so I don't smudge anything unnecessarily. Now, even though this is going to be the darkest bits, the tree, as it goes off the top of the page, doesn't need to be jet black or too dark. It can be a little softer, a little less saturated or intense, because we don't want too much attention shooting off the top of the page. But that said, I think most of it wants to be a little bit darker than anything we've seen. I didn't draw in leaves or any particular branch structures. I just sort of placed a canopy where I think the trees should go. So I'll do a little bit of design on the fly, or quite a bit of design on the fly as I go. Just listen to the drawing, see what it needs. There is a tree there. It doesn't look like this though, so I'm pretty much making all this up as we go. Again, I'm just trying to add what I think will look good in the drawing, not what's literally there. I do want to bring down carefully, I hope, and not too heavily, but a few smaller branches to lap over the front edge of the temple with some very dark darks to help, as I said earlier, establish the sense of depth and perspective going back into the drawing. So compositionally, these are pretty critical marks. And I'm being a little explicit about it because we're pretty near the center of focus. Doesn't need a lot though, so I don't want to overdo it. But already I think you can see that darker value in front of the lighter, softer tones already begins to feel like it's forward. It already begins to speak about that illusion of three-dimensionality and depth that I'm going for. So right around here where the tree touches the temple, I'm being pretty dark, pretty explicit with my marks, a little bit more clear and less gestural than I am elsewhere, because it's the center of focus. As this goes back into the body of the tree, I'll get a little less dark probably, and definitely a little less explicit. All right, I found the Palomino Blackwing, that is the black surface, is the slightly softer version of this sketch pencil, so I want to use it here just to get as dark as I can, as quickly as I can. So yeah, this makes really velvety, extremely dark marks. Beautiful pencils, gosh. All right, up here, obviously important, but not as close to the center of interest, so I can be a little less intensely dark, a little less aggressive, a bit more representational than the trees in the distance, but a little less so than I was around the actual temple. So I am drawing these, I'm designing these branches and just drawing them in with a moderate amount of pressure, not too much. I was pushing about as hard as I could when I did these marks to get them as dark as I could. These I'm pressing down about half as much so that they're not as dark or solidly black. Again, I'm thinking about layering some of these darks over some of the lighter tones in the distance to again amplify that sense of distance and depth, perspective. But yeah, it's working. But I don't want to go too crazy as I climb off the edges of the paper. I want everything to soften out just to help orchestrate the viewer's eye down closer to the center of focus. Few things are more fun than drawing trees. There's just, they're all like people. They have personalities and no two are alike. So you don't really need a blueprint. You can just sort of make them up as you go. The best thing to do, I think, besides just drawing them a lot, is just don't think about it too much. Hold your pencil back, not so tight on the lead. Give your arm a little bit of room to move around. And just be a little intuitive about the marks you make. I do think I want to populate the top of the drawing a little bit more, so not going to go too dark, but a little darker. And just suggest this tree goes off the edge of the page. Yeah, I'm not sure that was needed, if I'm honest. It's okay, not a big deal, but I think I'm gonna soften some of those tones up. Try to keep the far edge of this drawing a little more schematic. Yeah, that's better. Okay, now again, there are trees here, but they don't look quite like this. I just sort of made them up. So that's good and bad. It's good because nobody knows what they look like except me, but bad because I don't quite know what they look like. But ultimately good because all I have to do is draw whatever looks good on the drawing I'm doing, not try to mimic anything that's literally there. So it gives me much more freedom, but I have to accept it and do the right thing and not screw it up. trees, again, are fun in tonal drawing like this too, because you can play a lot around with soft and hard edges, lost and found edges if you like. Some negative shape paintings, some saved out bits, some impressionism, some abstract drawing. Pretty much anything goes. Again, you're not being representational in the sense that you're drawing an actual tree. You're just drawing shapes that look good, that hopefully look good in your drawing. So if it works in the drawing, it works. Pretty much drawing any sense of leaves and tonalities on the sides, on the trunks of the trees. Again, not with the point, but with the side of the pencil, sort of this wedge-shaped lead. It's just a really quicker and easy way to get these tonal expressions down. And I love the look of it when it works out well. It's similar to the old-fashioned chisel point, where in the old days you'd work up a pencil lead and shave off the sides so you can really make lines. If you're a fan of classic drawing, that chisel point drawings, graphite drawings are a thing of beauty. If you don't know the artist Samuel Chamberlain, Google him up and have a look. Just, he wasn't the only one, but he's one of the greatest draftsman pencil artists I've ever seen. In the earlier part of our last century, great many architects were unbelievably beautiful draftsmen. Still holds true today, but it used to be a much bigger expected part of the profession than it is today in most offices. But the ability to draw is just, gosh, they're breathtaking work they did. Samuel Chamberlain was more of a fine artist that just, I don't want to speak out of turn. I don't know if this is true, but I don't know that he did oils or watercolors. I think he was mostly known for his etchings and print work and pencil drawings. He did a lot of work around America, New England, I think in particular, but I became aware of him for his beautiful pencil drawings of European cityscapes. He'd often do very sort of, not necessarily iconic scenes always, but everyday scenes, working class streets, and just beautiful control over values and edges. So obviously, he was a big deal for me in trying to learn how to do what I do. I know I am old, but when I was coming up, learning and in art and architecture school, I learned how to try to do this work not because it was fashionable at the time. It really wasn't. Early stage computer work was coming online. I've just always been drawn to the more traditional ways of expression, watercolor, hand-done drawings, etc., even applied to more modernist idioms of design and drawing, but I just think they just always did it for me. The more old-fashioned techniques applied to more modernist expressions, I just think is another way to work in that sense of contrast that so excites me. The old clashing with the new and finding some kind of a resolution is a very compelling thing when it works. So I am not a dinosaur in the sense that I'm always in favor of the old over the new, far from it. But I do love the mixture of the two when they work well. So I think at this stage you can see where I'm going. I'm building up this dark foreground element that layers over slightly the temple and the midground to establish that sense of depth, and also with the darker value provides a foreground element to the entire work. Overall, pretty good. I think it's throwing some of my value design into a different consideration than it was about 5 minutes ago. Meaning the darks are all pretty much confined to the right side, and I think I'm going to want to bring some darker tones over. I did that before, but I think I'm going to want to go darker in here, is what I am saying. As this dark mass of trees descends through the drawing on the right side, I do not believe I have to bring them all the way down off the page. I think I can just let them fade out. They'll do their value organizing job well enough without having to go right off the page. I think here and there I would be well advised to add a few more of these organic bits to break up some of the rigidity of the architecture and to more successfully hug the shapes of it. The very top, I think I might add a few dark bits here just to flesh it out a bit. I do definitely think I need these, or I wouldn't be doing them, but I'm also aware that I could overdo it, so I want to be cautious. It's good. Now, just looking at the whole drawing together and balancing out the value families. The midtones look nice and comfortable. The lights generally look comfortable too. The darks to me look fine, but they look a little, as I said, heavily weighted to the right. I think I need a little bit more here to help balance it out overall. Probably a darker band through. I already have it, but I think I'm gonna beef it up a little. This will probably help balance with a little horizontal energy, some of this vertical energy. It'll also give me the opportunity to emphasize the creature in the boat a little bit more. I have to be really careful. There's so much lead on this graphite. I could smudge this drawing so easily, so I'm trying to keep my mitts off of the surface. Much better. Now we have a really nice dialogue, I think, between horizontality, verticality, darks, darks, to try to set up this triad of darks, as I talked about earlier, here, here, here. That will really nicely complement, we hope, this triad of lights, which is here, here a little bit, and there. So the dark triangle interlocks the light triangle. Very good way to connect all the values in your drawing and set up a nice dialogue between different areas and different elements. So the dark down here is needed, but I don't think it's needed too much, not as much as I originally thought. So I want to fade this out and make it look sketchy. I want to add a little bit more clarity to these overhead trees, but it's really dodgy over here. It's too easy to add too much, so hopefully a little goes a long way. I'm going to clean up some of the darker shapes I added earlier. Again, I'm just balancing values, trying to get this interlocking pattern of darks to connect to the lights. Yep, overall, I think I obviously may tweak this. I'm notorious for over-tweaking my drawings and paintings too. I hope I don't do too much because I rather like it. I think it's not overbaked. I think there's enough there that tells the story. And there we go. A tonal value drawing of a temple at the Borghese Gardens in Rome. I hope you found this entertaining and hopefully a little bit helpful, everybody. And I'm sure I'll see you back here again soon. Thanks so much.